everyone, welcome to another episode of History Snippets. This week we're going to be talking about oregano from our garden. You'll see actually behind me I have a number of different herbs that we are drying from the garden. Right behind me here we have our oregano. What we're going to be making with our oregano today is a soup seasoning. We got this from Mrs. Owen's Illinois cookbook, which has a soup seasoning recipe that includes not only oregano, but also some of our other plants such as basil and thyme. As you can see, ours are still drying and we are going to cheat a little bit and get some of the dried herbs from the store. But once our soup seasoning is done, we are actually gonna make a soup out of it today. We're gonna make a soup called Victoria soup. Victoria soup is also in Mrs. Owen's Illinois cookbook, and it is labeled as a cheap, palatable meat soup. Before we start to make our soup, what we need to do is make the soup powder, which is where our herbs come in, and especially our oregano, which is what we're focusing on this week. We've made a few little concessions on our soup powder so that we can get things more easily. For example, one of the things in it is dried lemon peel. We're not going to put dried lemon peel in it because I didn't have any. But what we're going to do is we're going to put a lemon pepper seasoning on it that you normally put on meat. The lemon pepper seasoning actually contains a few different things that we need for this, so it's actually killing two birds with one stone. Then basically all you do is dry all of those things. You pound them down in the mortar and pestle and you put them into a bowl, put them all together and put them in a bottle. So while I'm getting the soup powder all together, we're going to talk a little bit more about oregano and what it was used for in the 19th century. Oregano is also known as wild marjoram, and there was another marjoram called sweet marjoram, and they were used differently. And you'll find this in cookbooks where they'll often specify sweet marjoram and marjoram. They never really called it oregano, at least not that I've seen when I've looked in old cookbooks. Also, you could use oregano for all sorts of medicinal purposes. It was actually used pretty similarly to thyme. So, if you watch our previous video about thyme, you can see some of the same uses that we would use oregano for. Oregano was thought to treat all sorts of illnesses, from measles. Another way would be for headaches or colds. Even in some cases I've seen tuberculosis. And one really neat thing about these 19th century recipes is that they don't really give you a lot of direction. And yes, that might be intimidating for us at first. I can vouch for that being intimidating. But it really does give you a lot of freedom to kind of use the things that you have at your disposal. So I've already told you about the substitutions I've been making and my little cheats that I've been doing. So this is a mix of all of our different herbs. So now on to the soup. Now that we have our soup powder all ready, we're going to make our soup. And so one of the main ingredients in this is actually meat trimmings or meat bones. I didn't use that today because I didn't have any meat trimmings or meat bones. And also, I like beef stew, so I actually used beef stew meat in mine, and I'll show you what our soup looks like right now. So I'm in the kitchen right now where I've got our soup cooking. You can see it right below me. It's gently boiling right now. So what I started out with was the meat, and then once I had that browned, I put in about a gallon of water. On top of that, I also put a can, well actually I put 2 cans of tomatoes in there. Fun fact, canned foods were actually really popular in the 19th century. Back in the 19th century, they were canning all sorts of things. They were canning turtle, lobster, anything that they could can, they would can. Today, we still can some of those things, but we usually think of canning certain kinds of vegetables like corn and green beans and tomatoes. So it's actually pretty accurate that we would use canned tomatoes, but the recipe says you can either use canned tomato or you can use whole tomato. The other thing that I have cooking in there with the meat and the tomatoes is beans. Not really sure how that's going to turn out. I'm also not really sure how much of this I'm supposed to keep in the soup at the end, because they have after this 2 hours that you're supposed to strain everything out, and it doesn't say whether you put it back in the soup or not. I'm definitely putting the tomatoes back in the soup, and I'm definitely putting the meat back in the soup, but we'll see about the beans. After our soup has been boiling for about 2 hours, we're going to add a few more ingredients. We're going to add a carrot, an onion, and 3 potatoes. By the way, the room that we're in right now, I haven't mentioned yet, this is our archaeology room. Besides serving as our archaeology room, we also use this room as a makeshift kitchen. We don't have an actual kitchen in the house that we're able to use. Okay, so I've actually got the next step of my soup in. I've put all the vegetables in, the carrot, the onion, and the potatoes. By the way, the beans ended up not being as weird as I thought they would be. Okay, so I've just added the weird part into this soup. I'll kind of show you what it looks like. You see those lumps that are in there? It's actually a cup of flour with an egg mixed together and then put into the soup. So here is an image of the soup for you. that's what it turned out to be. I'm gonna give the liquid a little bit of a taste and see what it tastes like. Oh yeah, that's a good soup. Totally recommend it. You'll see the recipe down below in the comments of the video, and if you make it yourself, let us know how you liked it. We'll see you guys next week when we talk about another herb from our garden, rosemary, and then we'll be starting a new series of history snippets with some of our interpreters.